James Cameron's third installment for his epic sci-fi saga, Avatar, Ash and Fire, continued the epic tale of humans against the iconic blue-skinned natives, the Na'vi, on the planet Pandora. We honestly went into this film with our expectations tempered, having not really loved the second movie, The Way of Water, but to our pleasant surprise, Ash and Fire was a definite upgrade from the previous film, and while it didn't hit the same heights as the first film, it was still quite an enjoyable watch. One of the characters who we feel was finally given some much-needed development was that of Spider Socorro. Miles Spider Socorro, despite being one of the more interesting characters, at least on paper, always felt a little out of place in the previous movie. For a long time, we thought maybe that's precisely what the movie was trying to evoke, since he's a natural-born human of Pandora who's trying to fit in with the Na'vi. We couldn't help but compare him with Tarzan or Mowgli because the vibes are kind of similar in many ways, from his appearance to his circumstances. However, in Ash and Fire, his character moves from the fringes to occupy a central role in the narrative thanks to certain alterations that Eywa makes to his body. So join us in this video as we travel all the way to Pandora to uncover everything there is to know about Miles Spider Socorro's new body and what it means for the entire franchise. Let's get into it. What exactly did Eywa change in Spider's body? Throughout the Avatar series, there are several key moments in which Eywa steps in and provides vital assistance to the Na'vi. However, I think most fans would agree that there are only a handful of such moments in which we see her making such a drastic intervention as she does in the case of Spider. After the Sully family is separated following the attack on the Sky Trader's caravan by the Manquan raiders, Spider is left without much juice in his exopack that he must keep recharged at all times. This is because even though he's grown up around the Sullys and the Na'vi, the fact remains he's still very much a human. The last time we checked, the air of Pandora is still toxic to Homo sapiens, and Spider is no exception to this rule. Unfortunately for him, a band of pissed-off Manquan, led by their pyromaniac she-devil of a Sihik, Barang, stand in between the children and the substitute exopack. Now, with the raiders hot on their tails and their parents nowhere in sight, Spider and the Sully children are forced to scramble through the forest to find safety. Unfortunately, during this whole ordeal, Spider begins to succumb to the atmosphere of Pandora as his exopack's battery runs out. In this dire moment, Kiri communes with Eywa and summons thread-like tendrils from the ground which wrap themselves around Spider's body. Even as Kiri enters a trance, these mysterious strands, which seem to have a life of their own, continue to enter Spider's body. Honestly, I wouldn't fancy things creeping through my body like that, but hey, if it saves a life, I'm not going to complain. To cut a long story short, Spider obviously doesn't die. Not just that, he actually becomes the first human to become immune to the atmosphere of Pandora. Upon closer inspection at High Camp, the new home of the Omaticaya clan by Norm Spellman and the other humans, they make a startling discovery about Spider's newfound ability. You see, that thread-like substance that invaded Spider's body is mycelium. What exactly is the wondrous substance known as mycelium, you might be asking? Well, basically, it's a thread-like structure that serves as the roots for fungi. We have them on planet Earth as well, but the ones on Pandora act as connective living tissue that forms a network with all living organisms that dwell within. So this mycelium basically bonded itself into Spider's organs, making changes to him at a cellular level. This includes altering his nervous system, his lungs, and more. This becomes evident when later, Kiri uncovers Spider's very own fledgling neural queue, or as the Na'vi call it, the Kuru. We loved how for a child born on Pandora, despite being human, these changes signify his transition into being one with his birth world.
And then there was Spider. He was just stuck here, too young for...
Is Spider a Na'vi hybrid, an avatar, or something completely new? As I was saying a minute ago, the changes we see in Spider are both physiological and symbolic in nature. However, this isn't the first time we've seen humans becoming part of the Pandoran ecosystem. Guys like Jake Sully, Norm Spellman, and Grace Augustine are perfect examples of this in our opinion. Now remember, there is a difference between acquiring an artificially created avatar and actually becoming a Na'vi. To be Na'vi is to be spiritually connected to the world of Pandora, and while the avatar might grant you the basic means to do so, it doesn't make you a true denizen of that world. The recombinants are a perfect example of this. These are fully sentient, artificially created Na'vi who are implanted with the memories and personality of deceased humans, removing them even farther from the beings they imitate. You're probably curious as to where Spider fits in all of this. Well, Spider is nothing like any of these two former categories, which should be quite obvious just by looking at him. Spider, especially after his change, doesn't need to inhabit any avatar to really fit in with the natives. He's always slotted right in among the denizens of Pandora. It's just that now he has the requisite physiology to do so even more naturally. I wouldn't go so far as to call him a hybrid either, considering both his parents are humans, making him a proper natural-born human of Pandora, unlike the children created from the union of Jake Sully and Neytiri. We also think this makes it hard to just box him into a category. For us, the surgery that the goddess conducts on Spider is merely him being accepted as her child by Eywa. The way we look at it is that he is the first member of an offshoot of the human species native to Pandora, which is a fascinating thought. Now, I already hear some of you asking, wouldn't Grace Augustine already have the honor of being accepted as the first human by Eywa? Well, the thing with Grace was that when her spirit became a part of the greater collective of souls, she was in her avatar form. Unlike Spider, she's not a natural born, and her Q isn't really a gift of Eywa. It was only through the patron deity's compassion that she was admitted into that sacred realm. Unlike Grace, Spider has earned his connection with Eywa through birthright, which the goddess acknowledges with her gifts that change him, which is why we found it strangely surprising that Kiri would say that their ancestors would be shocked to see a human amongst them in the spirit realm, because, as we see at the end of Fire and Ash, Grace is right there in her human form already. Putting that aside, Spider is undoubtedly neither an avatar nor a hybrid. He's an entirely unique entity who might give rise to a whole new breed of hybrid species. We know that his body has changed significantly, so we can assume that he'll be able to mate with the Na'vi. His most likely partner is going to be Kiri, who herself is the daughter of Grace, born through parthenogenesis, which basically means she has no father. Possibilities that Spider's changes hold for the future of Pandora are wild, as you can see. Maybe we might even get to see some spin-offs focusing on his tale later down the line. How does Kiri become the channel for Eywa's surgery on Spider? Earlier, we touched on Kiri's origins, so let me expand on that and link it to what we're talking about now. At the end of the first film, Grace dies while being connected to Eywa, but even as she breathes her last, her daughter Kiri is born. Remember the parthenogenesis I mentioned earlier? This becomes particularly important because it's heavily implied that despite the birth being asexual, Kiri is believed to have been conceived through the power of Eywa herself. This makes her connection to the deity especially strong and pure, which is ironic because she spends half the movie trying to connect with Eywa in order to convince the goddess to fight for her people. I guess the entire point of that was for it to be a rite of passage for Kiri. While we see every other Na'vi being able to connect to Eywa through the Oma using their Q, the connection that Kiri shares is especially powerful due to her lineage. Even Ronald, the Sahik of the Metkaina clan, acknowledges this, saying only Kiri had the power to awaken the warrior mother. We see Eywa responding to her desperation not only when Spider's life was threatened, but also as the Na'vi are being overwhelmed in the final battle. Like I said, this powerful connection guides Kiri almost subconsciously into acting as Eywa's conduit to perform the procedure that changed Spider forever. We like the fact that Kiri herself takes quite a while to accept her own parentage, even considering herself a freak, when Jake reveals to her the nature of her birth. Spider's transformation, thanks to Eywa, therefore not only serves as a pivotal point in his character arc, but also in Kiri's. What does Spider's new body mean for Pandora's future and the human threat? We previously mentioned what Spider's new body could mean for Pandora's future in terms of the birth of an entirely new species earlier in the video. That's just my brain trying to give a positive spin to things. However, if you were to look at just how obsessed our species is with this planet, things might have never gotten to the point that we speculated about earlier. As implied during the movie, Spider's new body could have massive ramifications for the future of Pandora in a negative way. Even as Norm excitedly rattles off the changes that the mycelium made to Spider's body, Jake's only concern is whether they can remove it. Jake's reaction here is fair because if the humans found a way to reverse engineer and duplicate Spider's condition, then a very massive handicap would be removed that had so far prevented humanity's expansion on Pandora. Without the need for a breathing apparatus, humans could spread freely throughout the planet and begin colonizing it properly. The RDA would strip Pandora of its resources and before long reduce it to its bare bones, just like they had done to Earth. The Na'vi would become extinct, or at least be pushed to the verge of extinction by the colonizers, which is the fate of every indigenous tribe when faced by a technologically superior invader. The damage would not just be physical, because with the pilfering of the natural resources, the very bonds that the Na'vi share with their ancestors would be lost forever. The loss would be catastrophic, as centuries of shared history and memory would be wiped out, never to be recovered. Due to this, we believe that even if the Na'vi survived, it would be a shell of their former selves and would never fully recover. It's morbidly ironic that a potential blessing for Spider and the planet could so easily be subverted into something cataclysmic. This is why Jake almost kills Spider in the woods, but is unable to bring himself to finish the act. The truth is, Spider's new body has both positive and negative ramifications depending on who emerges victorious. Could the RDA scientifically reverse what Eywa did to Spider? Just think about it for a second. The RDA are the same guys who created life-size, fully accurate avatars of an alien species. And that's not the half of it. They also found a way to transfer a person's consciousness into those bodies. To take things a step further, they then found a way to implant the memories of dead soldiers and personnel into these avatars to make them fully sentient. I think you can see where we're headed with this. Can the guys who do all these things scientifically reverse what Eywa did to Spider? If you ask us, the answer sounds an awful lot like a big fat yes. Parker Selfridge, the super annoying head administrator of the Resource Administration Department, certainly seemed to think so. He was convinced that if they could capture Spider, the RDA could figure out what Eywa had done to the boy and mass-produce the effect. Selfridge points out to General Ardmore that the primary obstacle they faced in colonizing Pandora was the fact they couldn't breathe its air. For him, Spider was no less than a blessing sent from heaven itself. We can only speculate about the inhuman experiments they'd put Spider through to obtain this knowledge. We know from Norman that the mycelium and Spider had formed what he called an endosymbiotic relationship, meaning separating the two would kill Spider. He goes so far as to say that even attempting such a thing might end up killing the boy. That obviously isn't going to slow down the folks at the RDA very much. We think that the true horror for Spider would begin once they learned that separation wasn't a viable option. They'd probably keep the boy on life support, forcibly not allowing him to perish while experimenting relentlessly to replicate the process. At some point, death would be welcomed by Spider, but the suits at RDA will not grant him the peace he desires, since he's literally the key to them colonizing Pandora. Fueled by their greed, they'll subject Spider to all levels of inhumane experiments as they're constantly met with obstacles in recreating his condition. Numerous human test subjects would be sacrificed in the name of science to fuel the greed of a few. The only difference being the fact that while these human guinea pigs would be granted the sweet release of death, Spider would be kept alive and in agony, having gone completely insane from the pain and suffering inflicted on him. I know you might think I'm being a bit extreme regarding my speculations here, but you'll have to agree that these things aren't beyond the scope of possibilities. In fact, I'd say they're downright in character. As I already said, the answer to whether they can replicate the process, if you're asking me, is yes, they can do so, but the price that Spider and Pandora will pay for that will be beyond reckoning. I think it's really cool how James Cameron steered the character of Spider in Fire and Ash with this new body he gave him. For a character who always felt like he was on the fringe of the narrative, Cameron really developed his character gracefully and made him a driving force in the plot. For us, though, we absolutely love the energetic way in which Jack Champion plays this character. Even though Spider is an outlier among outliers in Na'vi society, his humor, earnestness, and love for Pandora really endeared him to us. What do you think about Spider as a character? Let us know in the comments down below. For now, though, it's time for us to say goodbye, so we'll see you in the next one. But until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.